Can Remus Repeal return to form, or has the series lost its edge? Let's dive into a review of Remus Repeal number 8. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that's right, I'm very excited today to dive into Remus Repeal Reserve number 8. Also very intrigued to see how this one lines up in terms of the premium market, one of the more special limited releases from MGP, or now it's known as Ross and Squib. Does it kind of line up with other contenders in its price range limited category? In recent years with the 6 and 7 of this series, most people had mixed reviews or were a little bit disappointed, to say the least. I think part of that is that Remus Repeal number 5, which I've never tasted, by the way, set the bar so high. That bottle was available for around $80 at the time and did really well in a lot of people's like whiskey of the year contender brackets, and it was just an absolute hitter. There was also a lot of well-aged bourbons in that one. Then 6 was definitely a mixed review, kind of mixed bag bottle. 7, a lot of people enjoyed, but felt like it was still a little lackluster. I do have a bottle of 7, so we will compare to that directly, and I'll let you know what I think more fully when we get there. And then now we have 8 to see if it can kind of return to form. I don't think it needs to be on the level of number 5 to justify its sort of status, but it does have to be pretty dang good. And that's because this bottle is available for $100 now. We're seeing that in the market a lot. Premiumization pricing is definitely going up. So for MGP's sort of more special release of the year, $100, it's not the worst, but it's not the best. In terms of the stats on this bottle and this blend in particular, it's 101 proof, which I think is a little bit higher. I think they might have all been 100 proof or lower before. So interested to see how that factors in. But 9% of this is a 2007 bourbon with a 21% rye in the mash bill. That is a 17-year-old bourbon. Some of that was in the 7 as well, but would have been 16 years old last year. Then we have 24% of this is a 2014 bourbon with 21% rye in the mash bill. So that's a 10-year-old. And then 67% is another 2014 bourbon with 36% rye in the mash bill. So we've got two 10-year-olds and a little bit less than 10% of a 17-year-old. Very interested to see how that kind of works together. For two 10-year-olds and a little bit of 17 at $100, that's about $10 per year or a little bit better than that. I don't think that that's outrageous, but I do think this bottle still needs to deliver. So let's go in on the nose, see if this premium bottle from Ross and Squib can kind of return to form. All right, on the nose here. Smells very nice. Very maple syrupy. And light caramel butterscotch kind of thing. Actually, might even go a little lighter than that, more like a vanilla custard. So maple syrup, vanilla custard. Subtle oak. It's definitely not like a prominent note in there, but it kind of underlies some of it. There's a fruitiness here that's really nice. It's more in the plum fig category. I really actually think it's a good dose of fig. And that sounds like a little bit of a pretentious note, but I do enjoy figs, and this is giving me that figgy vibe. Dark, almost a raisin kind of experience with the fruits. So that vanilla custard, a little bit of oak, definitely big maple syrupy vibe, and some fig. Decent complexity here. It's not super complex. I've let this open up for about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's really helped as well with some of the alcohol or ethanol sting, and that's kind of faded away. And now we've got something that's very sweet and very inviting. All right, let's go in on the palate though and see how it all holds up. Cheers. Mm, that's nice. I think that's the word that comes to mind. It's just a really nice profile. Um, you've got, for me, this experience just developed from a little bit of spiciness up front on the front palate and a nuttiness too, almost like a hazelnut roasted pecan kind of experience. Very nice. Wasn't really anticipating that as much given the nose. Then it really started to sweeten up and fade into this fig, vanilla custard, and a little bit of oak carrying over from the nose. Kind of had that wave of nuttiness and spice, and then brightened up, sweetened up in a sense. Maybe not brightened up, but sweetened up. And I felt like the sides of my cheeks like got a little bit of a wash from that sweetness, which is a really cool effect. I wouldn't say the finish is particularly long, like the flavor punch isn't there for a super long time, but the pleasantness is there. Like nothing unpleasant about this bottle at all. It's all sweet and very pleasant and approachable. All right, let me go on the palate again for a second sip, see if we can pick out some more flavors. Cheers. Okay. A little bit more of that maple syrup, a little bit more cherry working its way into this sip. But again, I'm getting that roasted pecan, hazelnut experience up front, kind of roasty, toasty, and then paired that with some of the spice. But then the maple syrup, a little bit of cherry, that fig, and some of that oak and vanilla kind of come into play in the mid palate and pretty quickly taper off into a finish that's just mostly pleasant vanilla, maple syrup, sweetness. A little bit of fig sticks around on the back end for me too, which is a nice kind of fruity note to stay with you. Let's go in for the third sip here, the final sip, and we will evaluate the entire whiskey overall. We'll think about that finish in particular and how long that lasts, and then I'll let you know what I'm thinking, and we'll compare right to the 7 right after that. All right, cheers. The nose, I do think I'm picking up a little bit more of that nutty experience, but it really is more on the palate. All right, cheers. Okay. So the finish, I would put solidly medium. I don't think it ventures into the long category, but what I would say about the finish is that I feel like I've pinpointed it more as that fig and maple syrup, but in the sense of like pure maple syrup, like right out of a tree in Vermont, just like the actual syrup from a maple tree, the actual sugary thing that isn't processed yet. It's just like pure, sweet, simple in a lot of ways. And you pair that with a little bit of fig and some oak. And that's what carries through for me on the finish. Maybe a touch drying too. Now that I've had a third sip, a little bit of a leather feel to the finish, but it's not particularly long. I think the shining star of this is just how approachable it is, how nice and pleasant the profile is, and it makes it very crushable. It makes it very approachable and very sippable. It's one that I would like probably find myself going to a lot as just like, you know, it's a Friday night and I want something very enjoyable, something I know is not going to present any problems for me, not anything that's going to be out of place. It's all very well balanced and it's just going to be, you know, very enjoyable to sip on. So let me pour a little bit more of this because I just ran out. We'll get out the 7 and we'll compare directly. I'll just cut right to that for you guys. All right, so I've pulled out the 7 here. I had a little bit of water too to refresh my palate. Let's go right in as a comparison point here and see how last year's release really stacks up to this one. Okay, so this is a much brighter nose. Orange citrus and honey. Bright red cherry. Some spiciness. Floral. This feels more like a high rye, slightly younger bourbon. So this one from last year did have a little bit younger stuff in it. There was a couple of 9-year-old bourbons in here from last year, a couple of 10-year-olds, and a little bit of that 16-year-old, which I think is basically the 17-year-old that's in the 8. And the proof was 100 proof. So very comparable stats here. But this one feels like a little bit younger and a little bit more of that bright high rye that you might expect from something that's high rye and not super old. All right, let me go in on the palate. Cheers. So I'd put it very much in the same category of very easy to sip on and very enjoyable, but it definitely does not have the depth of the 8. For me, this one exists in that higher register of bright cherry, honey, that big orange citrus experience coming through, some vanilla, but it doesn't have those darker tones like the 8 does. Yeah, even just smelling it, this is much more maple syrup, that nuttiness. It has some DNA characteristics that are similar, but this 7 is just existing in a higher register, and this one, the 8, has a little bit more bass tones to it. All right, let me just go right into this one as a direct comparison. Cheers again. Yep. Maple syrup, vanilla custard, really sweetens into that vanilla custard right now for me, especially coming off the 7. I can feel that. And then the fig experience is really nice. They're both very solid. When Remus Repeal Reserve used to be $80, I wasn't really even hunting bourbon that much, but I think at that price point, it was a very good value. At $100 for both of these bottles, I think we're talking about a series that's just about coming even with its value. I do think the 7 is more punchy on the nose and a little bit more in your face on the palate, but in a lot of ways it's very similar to the 8 in that it's sippable, approachable, and kind of delightful. The 8 though, I think for me personally, and maybe just thinking about the actual experience of the whiskey, is a half notch above the 7 for me. It's got more depth, and it's got more of those rich flavors that I expect from something that has some good age on it. So the high rye mash bill is still there, but it isn't coming across youthful to me in any way. This is coming across more mature and balanced than the 7. So, final thoughts. Is it worth your $100? Is the series returning to form? I think that, again, we're breaking even here. I think if you're a big MGP fan, there's a lot of it out there. This is one of their better products that I've tasted, and it's very, very good. So for $100, I can recommend the 8 for you to go out and purchase. I do think it's a really good presentation of that basically 10-year-old profile that they're giving you with a little bit of that 17. So very, very good. Is it Whiskey of the Year contender? Is it gonna wow people like the 5 did, which is maybe an unfair comparison? I don't think so. I think that this one is very good, worth its current price point, just up to that price point. So I wouldn't pay much more than the $100. I did see this one actually around me for 120 and then didn't buy it and waited a little bit, did a little more hunting in the area and found it for the MSRP of $100. So if you're a fan or if you're thinking this profile sounds like something that would suit you, that's maybe what I would recommend is don't overpay for this one. The $100 is fair given current market conditions and everything. But I do think it's a step up from last year. I haven't tasted the 6, but I imagine it's a big step up from that. We'll see how the series continues to develop. I would love to see them lean into a little bit higher age stuff. Maybe the 10, which is coming in 2 years, will do that as kind of an anniversary release. But for now, this 8 is very solid, in fact, very good whiskey, and it justifies its $100 price point, but it only justifies up to that price point, if that makes sense to everybody. All right, I'm rambling a little bit. I think it's very good. It probably will go in my Whiskey of the Year bracket just to see how it stacks up because I'm curious how this lower proof but well-balanced whiskey will do against some others from this year. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Bourbon Hutch YouTube channel here. Trying to gain some momentum toward the end of the year here and launch into 2025 with a lot more great content. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.